The town meeting was already loud when Wyatt Cole walked through the door. Men were standing in clusters, arguing about whether to run the new woman out of Bitterroot Valley before winter. She had been there 6 weeks, they said. 6 weeks of taking charity. 6 weeks of living on his property without contributing anything. 6 weeks of wasting good food and space that could go to someone useful. Wyatt stood in the back and listened to them tear apart the woman who had saved his life, and he waited until the room went quiet before he spoke. "She cooked from nothing," he said, and his voice carried to every corner. "She took—" He stopped, swallowed, tried again. "She took what I thought was garbage and—" His voice broke completely. He stood there with his jaw working and his hands clenched and could not finish the sentence. Stories like this one remind you that worth is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is the hands that work when no one is watching. If you want more stories that cut to the bone, subscribe so you never miss one. Drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Because what happened after Wyatt Cole finally finished that sentence became the reason people in Bitterroot Valley, Wyoming still measure character the way he taught them to. Wyatt Cole lost his wife and daughter in the winter of 1882. Scarlet fever. They died 3 days apart, his daughter first, then his wife, who had exhausted herself nursing the child. Wyatt buried them on the hill behind his ranch house under 2 pine trees, and after that, he stopped living. He did not die. He just stopped living. He worked the ranch because the cattle needed tending. He ate because his body required it. He slept because he could not stay awake forever. But he did not live. For 3 years, he moved through his days like a ghost. The ranch hands worried about him but did not know what to do. He paid them fair wages and did not mistreat them, but he barely spoke and he never smiled. He lived in the big house alone and let it fall apart around him. The garden his wife had tended went to weeds. The curtains she had sewn rotted on the windows. The rocking chair where she had nursed their daughter gathered dust in the corner. By the summer of 1885, Wyatt Cole was 42 years old and the loneliest man in Wyoming. That was when Mabel Porter arrived. She came in August, driving a wagon that looked like it might fall apart at any moment. Pulled by a horse so old and tired, Wyatt was surprised it was still standing. She stopped at the gate to his property and called out, "I am looking for work, any work. I can cook, clean, sew, tend animals, whatever you need." Wyatt walked down from the porch, looked at her. She was a big woman, heavy through the middle and hips, with gray streaking through her brown hair and lines around her eyes that said she had lived a hard life. Her dress was patched in 6 places. Her shoes had holes in them. The wagon behind her held everything she owned, which was not much. "I do not need help," Wyatt said. "Everyone needs help." Her voice was firm, practical. "You look like you have not eaten a decent meal in months. Your house needs work. Your garden is dead. I can fix all of that." "I said I do not need help. And I am saying you are wrong." She climbed down from the wagon, did not wait for permission. Just walked up to the house and looked around. "When did you last clean this place?" Wyatt stared at her. "What?" "The windows are filthy. The porch is rotting. There are weeds growing through the steps. When did you last take care of anything?" "That is none of your business." "It is if I am going to work here." She turned and looked at him. "I need a job. You need help. I do not care if you do not think you need it. I can see that you do. So I am staying. You can pay me or not pay me, but I am staying." Wyatt should have told her to leave, should have sent her back down the road. But something in her voice reminded him of his wife, that same stubborn certainty that she knew better than he did what he needed. So he did not send her away. "1 month," he said. "Room and board and $10. If it does not work out, you leave." "It will work out," Mabel said. She moved into the small cabin where the previous housekeeper had lived, a woman who had quit 2 years ago because Wyatt was impossible to work for. Mabel did not seem to care that he was impossible. She just started working. The first thing she did was clean the kitchen. It took her 2 full days. There were dishes in the basin that had been there so long the food was fossilized. There were pots that had rust growing on them. There was a smell that Wyatt had stopped noticing, but that made Mabel gag when she first walked in. She cleaned all of it, scrubbed until her hands bled. And when she was done, the kitchen looked like a kitchen again, instead of a monument to grief. The second thing she did was take stock of the food. There was not much. Some flour, some dried beans, a few wrinkled potatoes in the cellar, some salt pork that was more salt than pork, a jar of lard. That was it. Wyatt had been living on hardtack and jerky for months. He ordered supplies from town once every few months when he remembered, but he did not cook. He did not see the point. Mabel stood in the pantry and looked at the nearly empty shelves. Then she went outside and walked the property. She found wild onions growing near the creek. She found a patch of dandelion greens. She found sage and wild thyme growing on the hillside. She came back with her apron full of things Wyatt would have walked past without seeing. That night, she made soup. She took the dried beans and soaked them. She diced the wrinkled potatoes and the wild onion. She added water and salt and the herbs she had found. She let it simmer for hours, and when the ranch hands came in from work, she ladled it into bowls and set it on the table. Wyatt sat down last, looked at the bowl in front of him. It was just soup, thin and plain. But it smelled like food instead of fuel, and when he took a bite, something in his chest cracked. "This is good," he said quietly. Mabel did not smile, but her shoulders relaxed. "It is just soup. It is more than I have had in a long time." The ranch hands agreed. They ate seconds and thirds. They thanked Mabel when they left. And Wyatt sat at the table after they were gone and finished his bowl, and tried to remember the last time he had tasted something that made him want to keep eating. The weeks went by. Mabel cooked with what little she could find. She made biscuits with the flour and lard. She stretched the salt pork over a week by using tiny pieces in beans and stews. She foraged for greens and roots and herbs. She made things out of nothing, and every meal was better than the last. She also started fixing the house. She mended the curtains. She patched the holes in the roof. She weeded the garden and planted late-season vegetables, turnips and carrots that would grow fast enough to harvest before frost. She fixed the rocking chair. She swept the floors and washed the windows and slowly, piece by piece, made the house look like a place where people lived instead of a place where someone was waiting to die. Wyatt watched all of this and did not know what to do with it. He had gotten used to the emptiness. He had made peace with the silence. But Mabel filled the empty spaces with work and humming and the smell of cooking, and it unsettled him. One evening in September, he found her sitting on the porch steps with her head in her hands. He almost walked past, almost pretended he did not see, but something made him stop. "You all right?" he asked. She looked up. Her eyes were red. "I am fine." "You are crying." "I am tired." She wiped her face. "Just tired." Wyatt sat down beside her, did not say anything for a while. Then he asked, "Why did you come here?" Mabel was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Because I had nowhere else to go. My husband died 5 years ago. We had a farm in Nebraska. When he died, the bank took it. I have been moving from place to place since then, working where I could, staying as long as they would let me. Most places do not let me stay long. Why not? Because I am not young. I am not pretty. I am not fast." Her voice was flat. "I am just a fat old woman who works hard, and most people do not think that is enough." Wyatt looked at her work-roughened hands and her tired face and the gray in her hair. "You work harder than anyone I have ever seen. That does not always matter. It matters to me." She looked at him, really looked at him. "Why?" "Because you are the reason I have eaten real food for the first time in 3 years. You are the reason this house does not look like a tomb. You are the reason—" He stopped, did not know how to finish. "The reason what?" "The reason I got out of bed this morning and did not hate it." Mabel's eyes filled with tears again. "That is a low bar, Mr. Cole." "Maybe, but it is higher than it was 6 weeks ago." After that, things changed between them. Not dramatically, not obviously, but Wyatt started talking to her. Not about anything important, just small things. The weather, the cattle, a hawk he saw circling over the north pasture. She talked back, and slowly conversation became something normal instead of something painful. In October, the town council held a meeting to discuss the charity cases in Bitterroot Valley. There were 3 families and 2 individuals who had shown up that summer looking for work or land or help. The council wanted to decide whether to let them stay or run them out before winter when resources got scarce. Mabel was one of the individuals they were discussing. Wyatt did not know about the meeting until one of his ranch hands mentioned it. "They are talking about Miss Porter tonight. Some of the folks in town think she is taking advantage, living off your charity." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "She works harder than anyone on this ranch." I know that, but they do not see it. They just see a woman with no family taking up space. Wyatt went to the meeting. The church hall was packed. The council was already talking when he arrived, listing off the people they were concerned about. When they got to Mabel, one of the councilmen, a man named Dutch Sanders who owned the general store, stood up. Mabel Porter has been living on the Cole Ranch for 6 weeks, Dutch said. She showed up with nothing. No money, no family, no prospects. She is living off Mr. Cole's charity and contributing nothing to the community. That is a lie. Wyatt's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned. Dutch frowned. Mr. Cole, I did not know you were here. Clearly. Wyatt walked to the front. You are talking about a woman who works from dawn until dark every single day. You are talking about a woman who has brought my ranch back from the edge of collapse. And you are calling her a charity case. We are just saying, you are saying she is worthless. That is what you are saying. And you are wrong. The room went quiet. Wyatt looked at the faces staring at him. People he had known for years. People who had watched him bury his family and had not known how to help him. He took a breath. She cooked from nothing, he said. His voice was steady now, certain. She took what I thought was garbage, wilted vegetables, dried out beans, weeds from the creek, and made food that kept me and 6 ranch hands fed. She took a house that was falling apart and made it into a home again. She took a garden that was dead and brought it back. His voice cracked. He stopped, swallowed hard, tried to continue. She took a man who had been dead for 3 years and he could not finish. His throat closed up and his eyes burned, and he stood there in front of the whole town with his hands shaking and his jaw clenched, trying to hold himself together. The room was silent. Finally, Wyatt managed to speak again. His voice was rough, broken. She saved my life. Not by doing anything dramatic, just by showing up and working and not letting me give up. That is not charity, that is grace. And if you run her out of this valley, you are telling every person here that hard work does not matter, that sacrifice does not matter, that the only thing that matters is whether you are young and pretty and easy to look at. He turned to Dutch Sanders. Mabel Porter contributes more in a day than most people contribute in a year, and if you cannot see that, then you are blind. Dutch opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the council members. No one said anything. Wyatt looked around the room one more time. I am asking you to let her stay. Not for my sake, for yours, because this valley needs people like her. People who do not quit. People who work with what they have instead of complaining about what they do not have. People who... His voice broke again. He stopped, shook his head. Just let her stay. He walked out before anyone could respond. The next day the council sent word. Mabel could stay. In fact, all 5 of the people they had been concerned about could stay. The town would help where it could. Wyatt was in the barn when Mabel found him. She walked in without knocking and stood there until he looked at her. They told me what you said, she said quietly. Wyatt did not respond, just went back to mucking the stall.
Why did you do that? Mabel asked.
Because they were wrong about you. But your voice broke, in front of the whole town. People are talking. Let them talk. Wyatt. She said his name and he stopped working, looked at her. Why did your voice break? He set down the pitchfork, leaned against the stall door. Because I was trying to tell them what you did for me, and I realized I did not have words for it. You did not just cook and clean. You made me remember what it felt like to be alive. And when I tried to say that out loud, I could not do it without... He stopped, looked away. Without what? Without crying in front of everyone. Mabel crossed the barn and stood in front of him. I did not do anything special. Yes, you did. His voice was firm now. You took a man who was dead inside and you brought him back. Not by trying, just by being there, by working, by not giving up. That is special. I just did what needed doing. That is what makes it special. He looked at her, really looked at her. You do not see yourself the way I see you. How do you see me? Like someone worth keeping. The words hung in the air between them. Mabel's eyes filled with tears. Wyatt, I do not want you to leave when the month is up, he said. I want you to stay, not as the housekeeper, as... He stopped, did not know how to say what he meant. As what? As whatever you want to be. But I want you to stay. Mabel looked at him for a long time. Then she said, I want to stay too. He reached out slowly and took her hand, just held it. Then stay. In November, Wyatt asked her to marry him properly. He did it at dinner, in front of all the ranch hands. He just stood up and said, Mabel, I want you to be my wife. She stared at him. The ranch hands stared at him. Everyone was silent. "I know I am not an easy man," Wyatt continued. "I know I have been more dead than alive for years. I know I do not have much to offer except work and a house that you already fixed, and a life that you already made worth living. But I love you, and I want to spend whatever time I have left making sure you know that you are the most valuable thing that has ever happened to me." Mabel stood up, walked around the table, looked him in the eye. "Yes, yes, yes, I will marry you." The ranch hands cheered. One of them whistled, another one started clapping, and Wyatt pulled Mabel into his arms and held her tight enough that she had to tell him she could not breathe. They were married in December in the small church in Bitterroot Valley. The whole town came. Dutch Sanders was there looking sheepish. The council members were there, all the ranch hands. Everyone who had heard about Wyatt's speech and had watched a broken man find his way back to the light. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, no one said a word. When the ceremony was over, Wyatt kissed his wife in front of everyone, and when they walked out of the church into the snow, someone started clapping. Then someone else. Then everyone. They stood in the cold and applauded while Wyatt and Mabel climbed into the wagon and drove back to the ranch. That night, Wyatt made a fire in the bedroom hearth, and they sat together in the rocking chair, the one Mabel had fixed, the one his first wife had rocked their daughter in. Mabel was afraid to sit there at first. "It feels wrong," she said. "It would be wrong to leave it empty," Wyatt said. "She would want it used. She would want you here." So Mabel sat, and Wyatt wrapped his arms around her, and they rocked in silence while the fire burned down to embers. They lived in that house for the next 30 years. Mabel cooked and kept the garden and made meals out of whatever she could find. Wyatt worked the ranch and expanded the herd and built 2 more barns. They never had children. Mabel was too old by then. But they took in 3 orphan children over the years and raised them as their own. The house stayed clean. The garden stayed green. The curtains stayed mended. And Wyatt Cole, who had been a ghost for 3 years, was alive again. People in Bitterroot Valley talked about Wyatt's speech for decades. They talked about how his voice broke in the middle of telling them what Mabel had done. They talked about the way he stood there crying in front of the whole town and did not apologize for it. They talked about what it meant that a man like Wyatt Cole, hard and silent and private, had been willing to fall apart in public to defend a woman everyone else had dismissed. And they talked about what the speech meant, not just for Mabel, but for everyone. Because after that night, the people of Bitterroot Valley started measuring worth differently. They stopped looking at whether someone was young or pretty or easy. They started looking at whether someone worked hard, whether someone showed up, whether someone took what they had and made something out of it. Mabel Cole died in 1915 at the age of 71. Wyatt died 3 months later. They were buried on the hill behind the ranch house, next to the 2 pine trees where his first wife and daughter rested. On Mabel's headstone, Wyatt had carved the words he could not say in the town meeting. She cooked from nothing, she worked from nothing, she loved from nothing, and she made everything. And underneath, in smaller letters, she saved my life, not by trying, just by staying.